We are back talking New England Patriots football on the Our Football Network with Evan Lazar of clnsmedia.com and, of course, Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. And another win, another week. The Patriots have now won 7 straight up and against the spread. Go into the bye, come out of the bye, Evan, to take on a very good second half Indianapolis Colts football team. They've only lost 1 game in regulation since September, and that was against the defending Super Bowl champs, the Tampa Bay Bucks, that they actually had a chance to win that game as well. So this should be a really fun matchup on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's really going to be a good one, and I think that this is an interesting schematic game plan chess match between Frank Reich and Bill Belichick on Saturday night for the Colts offense against the Patriots defense. Going back a little ways, this is the same scheme from the Super Bowl 52 Patriots Eagles that torched the Patriots defense for 38 points in that Super Bowl. Same exact offense that Frank Reich is now running in Indianapolis. Nick Foles started that game, but Carson Wentz was the starter for Philadelphia for most of the year that year. So they have Wentz playing good football in a very similar, comfortable system for him in Indianapolis with Reich. They can run the ball and they can throw the ball against you effectively. So if you're Bill Belichick, and I look at that game against Tampa Bay a few weeks ago before Indianapolis had their bye week as well at the same time the Patriots did, and against that game against Tampa Bay, the Bucs did a nice job in the first half stopping the run and stopping Jonathan Taylor out of base defense. But what ended up happening was that Reich ended up adjusting to 11 personnel. He put an extra wide receiver on the field and started spreading out the base defense, right? So Tampa Bay was putting their big guys on the field to stop the run, and Carson Wentz was coming to the line of scrimmage under center, seeing the base defense out there, checking out of run plays, going empty, spreading the entire field out with 5 wide, and then just throwing in the middle of the field at will against the Bucs linebackers with favorable matchups. So what do you want to take away if you're Bill Belichick? Do you want to key on this run game with Indianapolis, with Jonathan Taylor and how successful they've been on the ground this year? Do you want to key on the run game, or do you look at it and say they can run the ball for 5 yards per carry, but we'll hunker down in the red zone, and once they get into the scoring territory, force them to kick a bunch of field goals and win the game like they did against Tennessee, where they gave up over 200 yards rushing, but only gave up 13 points on the scoreboard? So which way do you want to go? Because Indianapolis can play it both ways, right? Against Tampa Bay, they threw for 300 yards in that game and a couple of touchdowns by Carson Wentz, and they scored 31 points on the Bucs defense by adjusting at around halftime to, okay, they're loading up against Taylor. They want to take away the run, so we're just going to throw it on them. And they found success throwing it on them. And so I'm really fascinated to see what is it from a game plan perspective that Bill Belichick prefers to take away. Is he really that sold on this Colts running game and saying, if we play out of nickel and we play a little bit off and a little bit back in the back 7 to try to take away play action and some of the deeper shots down the field, they're not going to just run for 5 yards per carry. They're going to run for 8 yards per carry, and we're going to be in big trouble.
Sure.
Or does he feel like taking away the explosive passing plays and limiting them to just running the football like he was able to do against Tennessee, that's the better route to go? So this is a really tough matchup for me, personnel-wise, for the Patriots, because Frank Reich is not afraid to adjust and lean into what you're trying to take, right?
Sure.
If you're trying to make him play pass, he'll pass. If you're trying to make him run the ball, he'll run the ball. So which way do you want to go if you're Bill Belichick, and kind of pick your poison of which way you want to be a little bit more vulnerable to?
Yeah, because it's interesting. I think they talked about that after, and they've talked about that a couple of times this season after the Colts had such high passing percentage games in which they lost. And but I just look at that as nitpicking, because like you said, sometimes you just have to go with it. Sometimes you really, especially against the Bucs, who have one of the best run defenses in the league.
Right.
If you don't think you're going to gain much running the football, then sort of like, in a way, what Belichick was thinking last week. Why am I going to try passing the ball when it ain't going to work? So let's just run the football, and that's going to be our strategy. And on the flip side, I think that's what Reich was thinking against the Bucs, and that's what Reich thinks from time to time is even though they'll lose and then they'll look at the rushing and go, you have Jonathan Taylor. How can you take the ball out of his hands? Hey, this is, I agree. We have to run the ball better, but that's coach speak. He knows what he's doing. And I think generally, because I've seen all these Colts games this year, they're a team that I like because of the fact that they're so, I don't know what the right word is, but
balanced. They're really balanced.
Yeah, they're very balanced. Yeah, and I believe they should.
Usually that's like a coach speak type of thing, right? Oh, they're so balanced. They can do it. But Indianapolis is really like that. And to your point about the run game, because they threw Tampa Bay out of their base defense, because Tampa was putting their big guys on the field and the Colts were shredding them through the air out of those empty formations, because they threw them out of base in the second half, they ran the ball effectively against nickel fronts, right? They got that extra defensive back on the field, and all of a sudden these huge rushing lanes started to open up for Jonathan Taylor, and the offense really opened up at that point. So when I look at a Patriots bad matchups for the Patriots defense notoriously in the past, and you look at that Super Bowl against the Eagles a few years ago and why it was such a bad game for the Patriots defense, besides the fact that Bill Belichick left Malcolm Butler on the sideline. Taking that out, the reason why it was such a bad matchup for the Patriots is because they were on their heels for 4 quarters, because they didn't know in any given down or distance if the Eagles were going to throw the ball or if the Eagles were going to run the ball. If Belichick can suffocate one thing and make you one-dimensional so that you're predictable and he knows, okay, you're going to pass it here or you're going to run it here, then they can really shut you down. But when you keep them off balance and you keep them guessing as to what you're going to call on any given down, and you have to have success, obviously, in both avenues to keep them guessing. But if you can run the ball consistently and pass the ball consistently against them, then Belichick, his game planning and his wizardry goes away just a little bit, because it's like, well, what am I game planning against, right? What am I trying to take away? What am I trying to limit? So every game plan from the Patriots, number one, when they go in against a team, is we need to take away X, right? We need to take away your run game. We need to take away Stephon Diggs. We need to take away Tyreek Hill. There's always one thing that he goes into every single game plan with and said, if we take away Stephon Diggs and we make Josh Allen beat us throwing to Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox and Emmanuel Sanders, and we force Buffalo to run the ball against our front, which we feel is a great matchup for us if they do hand the ball off, then we're going to win this game and we're going to be able to shut down their offense. So with Indianapolis, their run game is obviously their focal point, but they can throw the ball on you if you put extra, weight on the field and you go big to stop the run game. Then you give yourself vulnerabilities against the pass. So, like I said at the beginning, I am just really fascinated to see what does Belichick choose as the most important thing to take away in this Colts offense. Is it Taylor? Because on paper, it looks like it would be Jonathan Taylor.
You would think so, yeah.
That would seem obvious.
Yeah.
And if Carson Wentz beats you, then you tip your cap and Carson Wentz beats you. But this is a year where Wentz is playing really well. And they have him. He's not turning over the ball.
By the way, so you say, and so I say, I think this is one of the most disrespected players in the league this year. How many times do you hear, like, especially whenever he makes that 1 or 2 bad plays in a game, like he'll just toss those balls, those ridiculous flip passes, into the opposition's hands in the most crucial wrong time. Right. People want to slam him like he's still the bad Carson Wentz. All you got to do is look at his numbers. I mean, look at this. He's had 8 out of his 13 games this year. He's had at least 1 touchdown with no interceptions. He has a 22-5 ratio. What else do you want the guy to do?
Yeah, I thought he saw the field extremely well against Tampa Bay. They dialed up, Tampa Bay is a very zone heavy coverage system. They don't play a ton of man to man with the Bucks, play a lot of zone. And Reich was dialing up those zone beaters, flooding zone coverages and things like that. And Wentz was seeing it. He was getting the ball where the ball needed to go. And he was able to see where the vulnerabilities were in the coverage, what they were trying to achieve by the routes that they were trying to run. And to me, when I watch a quarterback, that's the most important thing that I want to see are his eyes in the right place? Does he have the right idea? Not every throw is going to be perfect, but is the decision making right? Right? Is he getting to the reads? Is he getting to the right receiver in the progression? Is he letting the route combination develop and then working off of the scheme and letting the system run itself? And I have thought it was really impressed. And you look at the interception that he threw to Antoine Whitfield Jr. First of all, it's one-on-one coverage down the field for a 6'4" wide receiver in Michael Pittman against a 5'10" safety in Antoine Whitfield Jr. And somehow the safety won the matchup, right? And somehow the safety went above Michael Pittman and made that catch. So I look at that and I say, he took the one-on-one shot down the field. He aggressively tried to get a big play. He had the safety beat initially. Michael Pittman did, and Antoine Whitfield made an Antoine Winfield type of play and flipped his hips and got into better position. But you'll take your 6'4" wide receiver on a jump ball over Winfield, who's notoriously not a very tall guy. You'll take that every day of the week, and you just will hope your receiver makes a little bit of a better play on the ball in the future. And then the second interception in the game was at the end of the game when he was just trying to score a touchdown with 10 seconds left in the game. So I throw that one out completely. It was basically a Hail Mary interception. So the only real mistake that he made in that game was the Pittman interception, and that really wasn't a terrible decision. He got what he wanted, and he tried to give his guy a chance to make a play. And Pittman, I don't know if he stumbled or what, but he just didn't look too interested in going after the ball. So it was really more on the receiver in my mind than on the quarterback. And I thought that Wentz played a great game against the Bucks. So
yeah, I think people look back at that Tennessee game, that Tennessee loss, as one they let slip away, and Wentz had that terrible interception where he was trying to play like a Brett Favre, on the street.
Right.
And that's what you're going to get, though, with Carson Wentz. It's just the way he is. That's why he gets hurt all the time.
Yeah.
It's because that's what you're going to live and die with Carson Wentz on. But that's what I'm saying, is that the media, they want to always talk about the big failed play at the worst moment. And they're going to blame Carson Wentz. But look, everybody knows, the people who really know what's going on, and he's having a really good season. And you can't say that there are many teams out there that have the balance that the Colts have, because there just aren't. I mean, the Tennessee Titans, we all thought the Titans were going to have the best balance that we've ever seen when the season started. And it looked like that was going to be the case. Now, that's all gone out the window because of the injury to Henry and even to the receivers. But that's why that's so important, is because it's so rare.
Yeah, it's really a hard offense to match up against. And you look at their passing game, too. And we talked about the Bills with Stephon Diggs, right? And you needing to take away Diggs, and then you make Josh Allen beat you throwing to the secondary receivers. This Colts offense, I think a lot of people would look at it and say, oh, they need to go and draft a number one receiver or sign a number one receiver. They don't have a Stephon Diggs. They don't have a Tyreek Hill. But they also don't have an obvious guy to take away as a result. And they spread the ball around really well because they don't have one receiver that you're keyed in on, that you're trying to take out of the game. And so you get a lot of one-on-one matchups all over the field as a result, because the defense isn't necessarily cluing in on those receivers. They're probably cluing in on Jonathan Taylor a little bit more. So you also look at the way that they run RPO concepts, play action concepts, throws in the middle of the field off of RPO actions and things like that, give you run pass conflict, and you have such a great running game. Tampa Bay got shredded by RPOs against Indianapolis because their edge defenders were constantly crashing down on Taylor. So he was faking the handoff to Taylor. The edges were crashing down to take away the run lanes. And then he was just pulling the ball and throwing it right behind them to wide open receivers off of RPO looks. So it's a really difficult offense to defend. And in a lot of ways, these offenses that can beat you in multitude of ways are hard for everybody to stop.
Sure.
But for Bill Belichick, I think it drives him nuts a little bit because he's like, well, what do I
Yeah.
take away? Like, that's my game plan every week is I make you play left-handed. So what's making Indianapolis play left-handed? And the only answer to that, and it comes down to excellent early down defense so that you can get them into these situations, is that when Carson Wentz is a straight drop back passer, when there's no play action, there's no gimmicks, there's no motion, there's nothing.
Third and long.
Yeah, third and long, second and long situations where the defense can truly just key in on a drop back pass. You look at his splits, his play action versus non-play action splits are substantially different. I think it's around 6.2 yards per attempt when he doesn't use play action. So a much easier person to defend if you're just going on straight dropbacks instead of all the bells and whistles that Frank Reich adds into the offense. But if you're in 2nd and 5 and 3rd and 4 all game long, then those bells and whistles are going to come at you all game long. So you really need to get them into 3rd and 10. You really need to get them into obvious passing situations to make it advantageous for you. So this is a tough matchup for the Patriots. I keep saying that, but it's really one that I don't look forward to if I'm a New England fan from a Patriots defense perspective, because these are the types of offenses that are so well balanced, that are well coached, that make in-game adjustments like Indianapolis did against the Bucs, and have the fortitude to be able to see this is not going to be a Jonathan Taylor game. We got to adapt to the pass game and then come back to the run game late once they kind of react to what we're doing. And those types of chess matches, and a coach that actually has the wherewithal and the brains to go toe with Belichick like that, it's problematic. And then you also throw into the fact that Frank Reich is a very aggressive play caller, somebody that will go for it on 4th downs and go for 2-point conversions and do all of those new age analytics type of things that people love and hate. The fact that he will push the envelope on 4th down, I think, is troublesome as well for the Patriots, because you get them into 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, and plus they're going for it. So they're a 4-down team,
and it's
right?
the same thing. You don't know what they're going to run.
Right, and you're not stopping them on 3rd down doesn't necessarily mean that you've stopped them. So I think that's another thing looking at this game that Reich will remember about the Super Bowl. And I know Patriots fans shudder to hear about the Philly special and all that kind of stuff, but that was such a big part of how the Eagles were able to pull off that upset in the Super Bowl, is that they kept the pedal to the metal the entire game and were able to and willing to take some chances and successfully took those chances. So Reich is going to, I'm sure of it, is going to coach this game exactly like he coached that game. He now has the horses on offense and the personnel to match some of the things that the Eagles did back in that Super Bowl. And if the Patriots can stop this offense and this Patriots defense does its job and shuts down Indianapolis on Saturday night, then I'm running out of things to doubt about this team, right? I mean, if they can go to Indy and stick it to Indianapolis's offense and really shut them down, then I think that will answer a lot of questions that we still have about this team of how for real is this defense? Have they just been beating up on some bad teams? They play Tennessee without everybody, right? No Julio Jones, no A.J. Brown, no Derrick Henry. How much does that game really matter? How much did the Atlanta game? No Cordero Patterson, no Calvin Ridley. I mean, they've lucked into some injury luck here in this win streak for sure. Cleveland, no Kareem Hunt, no, they didn't have Nick Chubb. They played a lot of these teams shorthanded.
And the weather was a huge help,
right?
Last
the
week.
Weather in Buffalo. So I hate it. Like, it drives me nuts that everybody's trying to take away from the win streak because of all these factors. But these are legitimate points to bring up if you're looking at it from a long-term point of view of, is this Patriots team as good? Not necessarily about the narratives, because I don't really care about what Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless think, but just in terms of the analytics and the numbers, when you look at the Patriots are number one in so many categories across all of the statistics that we all have really started to look at, DVOA, EPA per play, even like some of the more traditional metrics. They're number 1 in scoring defense. They're number 10 in scoring offense. They're up there in yards on both sides of the football as well. They're number 1 in the league in scoring drives, number 1 in the NFL, and getting drives on 48% of their drives come away with points, which is number 1 in the league. So you look at all these metrics and you see number one, top 10 here, top 5 there. And there's a lot of, it's hard to poke a lot of holes in this Patriots team, but this Colts team, as they are a little bit Jekyll and Hyde, right? Some games they come out and they, especially at home,
True.
They haven't been as consistent at home this year as on the road, but I don't know. I think if they are able to win this game against Indy in the way that they've won all these games during this 7-game win
that would
streak,
be huge. Yeah.
Then I think it would really go a long way of solidifying what they've been able to do over the last couple months.
Yeah, because you got to remember, and I'm not sure many people do, is that, and I know you do, but a lot of the fans may not recall that the Colts had some major quarterback injury issues earlier in their season with Wentz.
Right.
And that's the reason that they got off to such a bad start. And it was like, they have a tough schedule. They've got the banged up quarterback. So they're going to lose these games. It's a matter of, can they then come back from this really bad start to the season? And they have. And it's still a long way to go. You got a team that has already lost, close games to the Rams. They lost twice to Tennessee. They lost in overtime to Baltimore, which they should have won that game on the road. They lost that other overtime game to Tennessee. I mentioned they probably should have won that game. They beat up on Buffalo in Buffalo. So we have to remember that blowout win. So This is a for real team this is not a 7-6 team.
Right.
If Wentz is healthy from the get-go, this is at least, you would say, more like a 9-3 team. This is a team that's right up there with the Patriots battling for the number 1 seed.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a great matchup for so many reasons. And you look at, just looking at the offensive side of the ball for the Patriots, because we talked a lot about the defense, I do think the Patriots have some advantages against the Colts defense and will be able to move the ball against Indianapolis. But in a lot of ways, I feel like this game from the Patriots offense perspective is more about themselves than it is about anything with the Colts. The Colts are a very heavy zone coverage team. They actually have played more dropbacks and zone coverage than any team in the NFL this year. So they play a ton of zone. And notoriously, a lot of people make it about Tom Brady. It certainly was. But even Josh McDaniels is a great play caller against zone coverage, because if you're just going to sit back and cover 3 or cover 2, then McDaniels knows what's to call against those coverages, right? He understands how to manipulate those coverages and get guys open against zone, whereas against man-to-man, he can call a play that maybe is an effective man beater. But if his guys don't go out there and win their matchups, then the play call is really obsolete. But against zone, you can flood the zones, you can high-low the zones, you can do a bunch of different things to manipulate zone coverage. And the Patriots have had great success with that over the past 2 decades. They've had great success with that even this year with Mac Jones. So I think that they're going to be able to throw the ball a little bit against them. And although Leonard Fournette and the Bucs are on a roll with their running game, and it's difficult to stop their running game too, I think the Patriots can run the ball a little bit against this Colts front too, because it is a little bit undersized, right, guys?
Yes.
Their best players in the front 7, guys like Darius Leonard, for example, who's a terrific player, but he's a fast, speedy type of linebacker. He is not a take-on linebacker. It's a lot like Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano with Buffalo, right? So I think the Patriots are going to look at this matchup with Indianapolis's defense and say, we're going to run these guys over too.
Sure.
Right? We're going to have that advantage, and we're going to be able to run the football against these guys. So I think that this has a lot of makings, is kind of the point I'm getting to, of being a high-scoring game. I think that this could be a high-scoring game. And if it becomes a high-scoring game, then you have the last shoe to drop with the Patriots of, can they win a high-scoring game? If they have to score 35 offensively to win the game. Can they do that? Because they've won in blowouts, right? They've won against the Jets and they've won against the Browns when the other offense isn't scoring at all. But when they've gotten into some of these games where it does go back and forth and you do have to go toe to toe with a good offense, the only opportunity that they truly had was against Dallas with Dak Prescott, and they lost the game in overtime. So if can this offense and with Mac Jones, who's going to have to throw the ball a little bit on Saturday. They're not going to be able to run it 46 times and only throw it 3 times. If Carson Wentz and Indianapolis is as bad of a matchup as I think they are for this Patriots defense, can they win a game in the 30s is something that we still haven't necessarily seen from this Patriots team. So a lot of really cool things, I think, going into this game that we're going to figure out about the Patriots. There's no weather factors, right? We're playing in a dome. So this is a clean, straight up type of game of their best versus your best. And what ultimately can you win a shootout if the defense ends up giving up a few big plays and ends up giving up some points because it's a bad matchup? Or can this defense choke out another opponent and be as good as they've been during the 7-game win streak against a really good Colts offense? So it's a fun one it's a litmus test to me in a lot of ways, despite Indianapolis's record, just because of the matchups and then the way that it looks on paper. It's really a barometer of where the Patriots truly are in this set, because they didn't really Buffalo should have been more of a test, but they didn't really get Buffalo, right? They didn't really. That game was such a unique one-off type of situation. So in this situation, I'm really interested to see what it looks like.
And it's interesting because we tried to break down that game as best we could against Buffalo, and it was just everything we talked about you just threw out because of the weather. And yet, to me, it looked like, and it's interesting because we talked about it during that game about Brian Daboll. And about as maybe he is better off being a head coach than this supposed offensive play caller elite, that he's just not. I think that to me, that's his weakness. He's not very creative in that sense. I think he does a good job, but I think what we saw in the game last week were his issues, which was, and I couldn't understand it. Maybe this is what McDermott meant, which is you got the wind to your advantage in the beginning of the game. What are you doing running the football? I mean, you're supposed to throw the football when you're at midfield 3 or 4 times with the opportunity to get off to an early start. And it just seemed like he was very tentative to get off. And then it was almost too late by the time he decided to throw the ball. And when he did, they were even having success pretty much to an extent throwing it into the wind. So those are the things that really caught Buffalo in that game. But this is when you get great coaching against other coaching staffs that are good, but are they capable of making the right decisions?
Right.
And Buffalo wasn't. Buffalo, their coaching staff got outcoached in the football game, and that's it. That's all you can say. The wind was a huge factor, but Bill Belichick completely outcoached the Bills, and that is, I think, why, no question, the Patriots have been able to take advantage of the situation this year and currently sit atop the AFC, because there are injuries, and when there are injuries to other really good teams and other teams like the Chiefs are off to slow starts, it comes down to coaching. And the Patriots now have a team that's capable of matching up, not necessarily with the best teams, but again, when those best teams start to come down a little bit because of the talent level isn't there anymore, that's when the coaching takes over, and that's why the Patriots currently sit atop the AFC standings.
I look at a team like Buffalo, and I look at a team to a degree during this win streak, for example, like the Chargers as well, who are another team that are sitting right in the hunt. And those are 2 teams to me that can only play and win one way, right? They play their game their way, and if they out execute you and they just out talent you in some cases when Buffalo plays some lesser opponents and things like that, then they will look like a juggernaut, right? They can look like a fantastic team and win in blowout fashion, but they don't have a plan B.
No.
They are going into every game with the Bills in particular. They don't want to run the ball. They don't want to stop the run. So if you play a passing game against the Bills, unless you're Tampa Bay and you can truly go toe to toe with that sort of strategy. This is in Buffalo, one of the best pass offenses in the NFL and the number one pass defense in the entire league on the other side. So if you get into a track meet passing game against the Bills, they are a really, really good football team and really difficult to beat. But they can't beat you any other way.
Yeah, that's.
And I think with New England, and I guess Indianapolis to a degree too, which is what makes this matchup so fascinating. Those are not only two teams that have the personnel to beat you in multiple ways, but they also have the coaching staffs that have the wherewithal and the brains and the in-game ability to adjust in-game to the way that the game is going and the conditions and all that kind of stuff to beat you in a multitude of different ways. But the Patriots in particular, and I think this is why they are sitting at the top of the standings, like you said, they have always been a game plan team. They have always been a multiple team. They're always been a team that wants to do whatever it takes to win. We'll run it 46 times one week and then we'll throw it 46 times the next week as long as we get the W. And now Bill Belichick has the personnel and has the talent to be able to do whatever he wants on any given play, any given week. So those are as much taking the Brady greatness out of it, right? And just looking at the team as a whole and what the most successful Patriots teams as a whole were the ones that could win any style of fight. If you want to play a 14-10 game in a windstorm, we can win that way. If you want to play in a dome and we got to throw it for 300 yards, then we can win that sort of game. If we have to play zone coverage on defense, we can zone. We can play man. We can play blitz. We can play. We can drop back 8 in coverage, and we can play you that way, right? Whatever way you guys want to play is fine by us. We're gonna find a way to win on all fronts, and I think a lot of these teams and. It's funny because I use a lot of the metrics in my work and in my reporting. So I'm not. I am an analytics guy. I do appreciate the math and I appreciate all the analytics. But I think a lot of ways the teams that are building their rosters based off the analytics are losing sight of the fact that each game takes on its own personality.
Yep.
And each game is different. This is not baseball.
No.
Where in baseball
you have 162 games.
Right, you have 162 games, so
the odds are going to work in your favor over 162 games.
Right.
Yeah.
The math eventually is going to win out in baseball because the math tells you, if you do this and you go on this path, your team's going to win 90 plus games, and over the course of 162, the odds are in your favor. But with football, the situation changes and it can change it in the game. Sure. But the matchups change every week. The conditions change every week. If you're at home or you're on the road changes every single week. And that is, you have to be able to adapt and play different ways to truly win at a high level in this league. And I think a lot of these teams that have built their teams and their rosters to be pass heavy on offense and only care about stopping the pass on defense because they say, oh, well, the nerds tell us that even if we give up 5 yards per carry, we're not going to lose the game, right? It doesn't matter. And the Bills-Patriots game was an extreme example, right? I don't think that necessarily holds water, but what really the run game is not necessarily the raw total of yards that you gain, but it's protecting your passing game. Because if you can't run the ball to save a lick, then teams are not going to try to stop the run. So then all of a sudden they're going to play back and they're going to take their linebackers back and they're going to be able to stop the pass, and they're going to force you to just run the ball, and your team's not built for it. Buffalo, your team's not built for it. You don't have the heavyweights on the trenches, and you don't have the running backs to win a game like that. So I don't know. It's fascinating to me how the Bills have built their roster, how the Chargers have built their roster in a lot of ways as well. Some of these other teams have built their teams that they are not factoring in so many elements of football. They're not factoring in I think most importantly, the conditions in which the game is being played in. If you're in Buffalo and you're a team that's playing all your games in Buffalo,
You don't
in
want to have a
Western
pass
New
happy
York,
offense. Yeah.
you got to be able to run the ball in
Yeah.
December and
Yeah.
January, or
Home
you're going
field
to be screwed.
advantage in January is, but in Buffalo, that's maybe not a good thing.
Right. So the fact that you're not looking at those types of things because the math tells you that passing is better than running, and if you pass more, then you're going to win more, and if the better passing team, and maybe that, look, the Super Bowl last year was between Kansas City and Tampa Bay, the two best passing teams in the NFL. So eventually that did win out. And the Final Four included the Packers with the MVP quarterback and the Bills. So the four most pass-happy teams really in the entire league. But the team that was able to have some balance on offense ended up winning it all in Tampa Bay. And you have to be able, and I think Bill Belichick has really done a great job of figuring this out throughout the course of his career, that one game might be a run game, the next game might be a pass game, the next game after that might be about your defense, and then you might need to win some games with some bounces on special teams or a big return, and you have to be able to contribute in all ways so that your team is balanced. And these analytics driven teams, especially, look, if you want to go for it on fourth down because your win probability model tells you that you should go for it on fourth down, then fine. That I don't know if that's any better than gut. Maybe it's the right way to go about things. But from a grand picture, kind of team building perspective, you have to have more ways to win than just to throw the ball for 350 yards every single week, because it's not going to be possible some weeks to throw the ball for over 300 yards.
And I just don't think Buffalo is going to they're not going to win it all until they get that. And right. If that means that Brian Daboll is not that guy, or he's been asking for personnel department to get him guys, who knows? But one way or another, they have to change, or else. And here's the thing too: is you have the two quarterbacks you talked about, two teams you talked about, Herbert and Allen, and you have the two very athletic, most athletic type of quarterbacks that will add to the offense just with their legs and their athleticism, and you still can't find a way to balance and give them a little bit of a break. Like, just imagine if these guys had a running game to speak of. I mean, just imagine how dynamic the offense could be. But you bring up the point about coaching, and this is what we talked about with Brady for all the years. And when he went and won a Super Bowl at Tampa Bay right away, we talked about it in the offseason, how spoiled Patriot fans were after what happened with the quarterback situation last year. What Patriot fans are now learning, and maybe they're not, maybe they're just too thick-headed, some of them, but how spoiled they've been with Bill Belichick. And he's proving, because last year when the Patriots, when the Bucs won and Belichick had a bad year, it was, oh, wait a second, Brady's getting the better of Belichick, and maybe it was Brady and not Belichick. Well, here we go. We knew that wasn't the case. But here we go, Belichick proving that what an advantage he has over every team in the league because of the way that he coaches. It's such a mismatch that and maybe you don't know it when you're there around it all the time. You just think about Brady all the time. And I know that the fans have given Belichick credit, but I just don't know how much credit that they don't get that he deserves. And this is it. There are no coaches in the NFL that coach the way he does. And it drives the other teams like me crazy that your coaching staff can't do the same.
Yeah. Look, I think in a lot of ways, the biggest reasons to me why what sets Belichick apart, I think in a lot of ways that people don't give him, I think we all give him a lot of credit for the game planning, for the in-game coaching and the ability to adjust on the fly and change his team week to week from a game plan perspective, and then also adjust to weather conditions and all, and do all that kind of stuff. But at the core of it, the base that he builds from a technique and fundamental standpoint that allow them, and really it starts in training camp and back in OTAs and mini camp and all that kind of stuff in the offseason program, and then in the summer, he coaches the techniques that he knows are going to be prevalent once the season starts at such a high level, and the staff does such a good job of drilling these techniques into the Patriots that when they need to run the ball, they can run the ball. And when they need to throw the ball, they can throw the ball. And when they need to defend the pass, they can defend the pass, or they can load up and defend the run. And they can play so many different ways. And I think the part that, yes, it does take a coach that has the wherewithal and the brains and the foresight to craft those game plans, but it also takes the coach that can prepare his team to execute such a wide variety of game plans throughout the course of a season. And I think that to me is the biggest thing, is that he coaches them up so well to execute in so many different ways that I think that that's where a lot of other teams and a lot of other coaches that try to emulate Belichick's style and even try to look at Belichick and say, well, why don't we become a game plan team? And why don't we do this? Well, it's because you go into a game, if you're Buffalo, and you say to your guys, we got to run the football against these guys, and they're looking around, they're like, well, we just spent 2 hours passing the ball in practice. Yeah. So how are we going to run the ball?
Yeah.
And now this week we come in on Wednesday for the first day of practice, and all of a sudden we're drilling stuff in run game stuff that we haven't even talked about
in training camp.
Yeah. Right. So, like, how, what do you mean we're going to run this play? We haven't run this play all year, and now you want us to run it now in a game. And I think that that's the difference, is that they have such an attention to detail here of drilling core techniques and fundamentals at the beginning of the season and training camp that they're going to use throughout the course of the year. And I think, talking to a lot of the assistant coaches too, I've had a lot of conversations with Dante Scarnecchia about this, the Patriots now retired, but legendary offensive line coach, because I find it so fascinating that the Patriots, depending on the game plan, can run the ball any way they need to run the ball. They can pull a guard, and they can play smash mouth. They can run zone schemes. They can run power schemes. They can run counter. They can run lead. They can run they pulled out a play against Buffalo called G lead that they hadn't run all year. But they not only ran it, they ran it right down Buffalo's throats with the play call in the second half. And the one thing that he really harped on was that although there are different schemes, the actual fundamental of the block is the same, and they do it the same way, right? A pull is a pull. Whether you're pulling to the mic, or you're pulling to the end, or you're pulling front side, or you're pulling backside, in the Patriot system, it's a pull. It doesn't matter what the action is for the lineman. It just matters the way that the coaches are calling it and scheming it up. So all their techniques and all their fundamentals overlap, so that when they come into a game and they say we're going to be 80% zone this week, they're not really reinventing the wheel. They're just kind of positioning the chess pieces on the board a little bit differently, but to the players actually playing the games, it's really what they've just been doing all year. And I think that is where the genius truly lies in Belichick. And I think the game, not that he doesn't deserve credit for the game plans, because the game plans he definitely deserves credit for. But I think that what gets lost in that conversation is how they're able to drill that into the players, in terms of, we can do whatever we need to do to win this game. Because a lot of these other teams, they, like I said, they have one way to beat you. They have one way to play. They have one way to beat you. And if the game doesn't go that way, or they can't execute that at a high enough level, then they lose. Whereas with the Patriots, they can do whatever they need to do to win the game.
And they're riding high first in the AFC, which can go pretty quickly if they don't win this week. Because again, they're only 2 games up. Let's keep that in mind, of the Colts. So it's not like the Patriots, are sitting 3 games up. But I don't know, if you take a look at the schedule, the good thing is that they do end with Jacksonville and Miami, which are very winnable games, even though we've talked enough on this program about how tough the Patriots, those matchups in Miami this late in the season are going to be.
Yeah.
And then Buffalo's next, even though it's at home, but that's next. So 2 of the remaining 3 games are going to be tough, are not going to be easy. They're not going to be given to the Patriots. They've got to play well in order to win those games. The Colts do end with Las Vegas and Jacksonville, so they're also in a pretty good position. But next week, I believe it's another Saturday game when they play Arizona. They play Arizona next week, and I believe that's another Saturday game. That's a really good game, especially if the Colts win. Then they're going to be riding pretty high right now. But when you take a look at the playoff picture in the AFC, I mean, it's crazy because after you get past the top 3 seeds, and we would all expect the Patriots, Tennessee, and Kansas City are going to make the postseason.
Right.
Anything. I still think the Bills are going to get in, but if the Colts beat the Pats on Saturday, they're in my mind, and I think the Bills are going to make it. It's going to come down to those other 2 spots, in my opinion, the Ravens and the Chargers, because you still have the Browns and the Bengals. I kind of given up on the Steelers, to tell you the truth, a while back, but I think the Browns and the Bengals are the 2 teams that could swap with maybe Baltimore and LA because they're only a game back, with 4 games left.
Right.
But bottom line is the Patriots are going to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of exactly what happens for them to get there. And this type of team that they have, if they're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the postseason, you want to play them in Foxborough.
Yeah, the Chiefs worry me. I mean, I think that is one team, though. They worry me because they're talent-wise, they're incredible. I mean, they're a juggernaut, right? In terms of what they present to you every single week. And as much as you can go out there and say, oh, well, we're going to put the safety over the top of Tyreek Hill and we're going to bracket Kelsey underneath. Once you get out there and it's Jimmy's and Joe's and not X's and O's, it's a lot easier for me to say, stay over the top of Tyreek Hill. Let's do it. So that I think is the big problem with KC, but they are another team that I think the reason why they've had struggles this year is because they can only win in one way, in a lot of ways offensively. Now their defense has woken up and has played a lot better football, and that makes them very, very difficult to go up against because offensively they feel inevitable. Even if you have a good game against Kansas City defense, and the Patriots have had a ton of these where they've played exceptionally well defensively against Patrick Mahomes, and he still hangs 31 points on them. Right.
It's always going to come down to the end. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So in all the matchups in the Brady years with Kansas City, the Patriots shut out in the first 2 times that they played Patrick Mahomes in the 2018 season. They played him in the regular season. They played him in the championship game in 2018. They shut him out at halftime both times. And in both second halves, Kansas City scored 31 points, 62 in 2 games against the Patriots in the second half with Patrick Mahomes. And it's inevitable. Eventually, they are going to find a way to beat whatever you're doing defensively. So I think the Patriots have some answers against Kansas City. I think that if you can play zone coverage like the Patriots have been playing at an extremely high level, stay over the top of those routes and force Patrick Mahomes to beat you underneath and force Patrick Mahomes to hand the ball off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, then you can limit their explosive passing game a little bit and keep them out of the end zone a little bit more. And that's sort of been the book on them this year, and why they've ran into some struggles is that Patrick Mahomes has to be willing and patient and able to take a profit. Just take the 5 yards, take the 6 yards here, the 7 yards there, and hope that you gain some yards after the catch and get some good breaks and broken tackles and things like that. Because you're not going to beat us over the top. You're not going to beat us with your run game because we're not afraid of your run game. And that's really been the book out on Kansas City. So I think the Patriots will have a good game plan against the Chiefs. But at the same time, it's the Chiefs. And they're, to me, on paper, the best team in the conference. Whether they have played like it all year or not, I think that they are the best and most talented team in the conference on paper. So,
well, now that they're playing like that now, they're back to being that team again. Yes.
Yeah, they're very tough. They're going to be a very tough out, assuming that Tennessee gets, Derrick Henry's a cyborg, and apparently he's going to come back from a broken foot in the same season, which does not surprise me because he's done this before, where he comes back from injuries that knock players out for 6 months. Derrick Henry's back in 2. He's just not human. So he sounds like he might be back for the playoffs for the Titans. So that changes a whole bunch of things when the Patriots play the Titans. If they play the Titans in the postseason, then the Titans are going to be a completely different team than what the Patriots beat in Foxborough.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be a tough game as well. Some of the other teams, though, look, the Bengals and the Chargers, there's no way Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert are beating Belichick in a playoff game.
I agree.
There's no way. Baltimore, I think, is a little bit too limited in the passing game now.
Yeah,
with
they're
Lamar
also going to be. They've got to make changes. They have to.
Yeah, so they're a team that I look at and I say, oh well, if you don't let Lamar run around, you're going to win that game.
Yeah.
So really, it's the Chiefs and the Titans, which are the two other 9-4 teams. So I'm not really going out on a limb saying that those two teams could catch the Patriots. And this Colts team, I'm really interested to see how this game goes on Saturday night. I think that this is a bad matchup for the Pats as well. So
well, don't you think though that I still think that if Cleveland can, Baker obviously has got to start his confidence level. If they can get to the postseason, has got to improve immensely. And if his confidence level improves and they go back to being able to run the football effectively and play well with their defense, then they're a dangerous football team in the postseason. But again, you just don't know what you're getting with Baker Mayfield. That's because same thing. Bill Belichick, Baker Mayfield, that's not a winning formula for the Cleveland Browns unless Mayfield is playing so well that he doesn't have to try to win the game against the Patriots. They can run the football, and their defense can also win the game for him.
Yeah, and that's a good matchup too, I think. But I have a tough time thinking that Baker Mayfield is going to beat the Patriots in Foxborough.
I agree.
And the main reason why is not even so much about Baker. Look, I thought that early on in that 45-7 game that Cleveland had some advantages on offense. They ran the ball right down the Patriots' throats on that opening drive with Dearness Johnson. They went right down the field. They scored a touchdown on that opening drive. And the Patriots adjusted to putting some more weight on the field and loading up a little bit against the run and changing some of the ways that they were fitting the run and things like that. And the next drive, Baker throws a near pick six, right? He throws the interception that Kyle Duggar returns to the 2-yard line or 3-yard line or something like that. But on the third drive, they came out and they were in 12 personnel, 2 tight end, and then they went empty against the Patriots base defense. And they got the Patriots in base with Hightower, Bentley, and Van Noy all on the field at the same time. And then they spread them out, and they were dinking and dunking their way down the field. And then Stefanski huddles, changes the personnel, and goes back under center. And I'm just thinking to myself, you had it. Like, you had the matchup. Like, you had it right there. So maybe they can go back and they can look at the game tape and they can say to themselves, we as coaches messed that up, right? We had the advantage there and we gave it back to the Patriots. But that to me is the way that you can beat this Patriots team, is by getting them to put the wrong personnel on the field. And the teams that can throw the football out of run personnel groupings, like Indianapolis, you can throw the ball out of 12 personnel effectively. If you can get that going, because the Patriots linebackers, Hightower, Bentley, Van Noy, you can throw on those guys, right? You can throw on those guys. So if you can get them on the field and then you can throw out of 12 personnel, or if you're in Indianapolis, you can run and throw out of 11 effectively, then those I think are the matchups. But you need to force the Patriots to put their linebackers out there.
Yep.
And if you let them play the game and you're going to only hand the ball off, and they know that, and they put their base defense out there and they're not afraid of your passing game, then they're going to shut you down in the run game like they did to Carolina, right? They weren't afraid of Carolina's passing game, so they played a lot more a big nickel and base in that game, and they were able to shut down the run. But if you let them dictate the terms with their personnel grouping, then they will beat you that way. But if you can do what they're not expecting and then get them to put Hightower and Bentley out on the field and then go after them in the passing game instead of running the ball at them, then that's where you can find those advantages. So the smart coaches will need to figure that out. Some of these teams, the Browns are one team that I do think is built to do that can get the Patriots, kind of goat the Patriots into put your run personnel out here because we have Nick Chubb and we have this great running game, but we're actually going to throw the ball out of these looks. Indianapolis, I think, can do that, and Tennessee can do that. I don't think Kansas City can do that. I don't think they can play that kind of game, but they also just have Patrick Mahomes. So eventually, that guy's just tough to stop. But that's really how watching this Patriots defense this year, it's really about personnel matchups. Can you get them in the wrong defense? And once you have them in that wrong defense, you got to go no huddle. You got to make sure they can't sub, and you got to keep them in that structure, because otherwise Belichick will just run his extra defensive back out there. They'll go to their more pass type of style of game plan that they have and install, and then you'll be done. So
well, that's why it's going to take when Bill's got one of these teams, it's going to take a really good coach to beat him in the big game.
Yeah.
So we know Andy Reid's that coach. We know Mike Vrabel can do it. But how many other coaches that the Patriots will face in this postseason have got that kind of? We know, we believe Frank Reich can do that. Yeah. But again, that's where we're limited, and there's not many other teams. Like you mentioned, maybe Stefanski can, but each one of those teams you just talked about, we could talk about players all you want, but they got the coaches.
Yeah,
and that's what it's going to take to beat the Patriots. So coaching, because they do have more talent right now than the Patriots do. And most of that is because the Mac Jones is still only a rookie who just keeps getting older, of course, each week, which is always going to be a good thing for New England the rest of the season. Okay, so next week, already we talk about the Bills again next week. So
I'm excited for that one because the Bills fans, Bills Mafia, the Bills team internally in press conferences, they've talked a lot of smack about that Patriots win on Monday night.
In what way?
Just that it was illegitimate because of the weather.
Geez. They got some nerve to say that stuff.
And just that if the Patriots and the Bills played in a clean weather game and the Patriots didn't have the weather to lean on and all this kind of stuff, that it wouldn't be close. So you never know what the weather up here, right?
Sure.
It could be another windstorm, blizzard, snowmageddon, whatever. But assuming that the weather is somewhat clear up here and there's not high winds like there were in Buffalo, and we can I want a even playing field. I don't want any more excuses. I don't want to hear anything more about how the game. Somebody literally told me that if the game was played in a dome, then the Bills would have won. And it's like, neither team has a dome. So how is that relevant? If the Patriots and the Bills played in a dome in the Super Bowl in a neutral site, then maybe Buffalo would be favored and have the advantage. But that's not a reality that's ever going to happen. If they play in the playoffs, if they play in the regular season, it's going to be an outdoor game. Yep. So it doesn't matter. So I don't want weather to be a factor in that game, because I want a clean slate of, you have no excuses for when the Patriots beat Buffalo, because I do think the Patriots are going to beat them again. And I don't want any excuses as to why they won the game. And that's all I got to say.
By the way, it was somebody explained to me the schedule for the Buffalo Bills, having to play a Monday night game against New England and then go to Tampa Bay to play the Bucs the next week. I mean, you would have thought maybe at the beginning of the season, okay, it's the Patriots, but they're not the Patriots of old, so that's okay. We'll take that. But that's some back-to-back type of situation for the Buffalo Bills. I feel sorry for Carolina this week. That's all I know before the Patriot game, because the Bills aren't going to put themselves in a position to possibly lose 4 straight with the Patriots on deck. So, but we'll see how it goes. We still have not 3, but 4 games left because of the extra game, and we'll see how that impacts the season. So, Evan, you will be on Wednesday, or is it going to be different this week with the Saturday game?
Yeah, different this week. So our preview show will be on Thursday this week. Yes.
Okay. Normally it's on Friday?
Normally it's Friday. Okay. Yeah, Friday for Sunday, but we'll do Thursday this week.
All right, Evan. Appreciate it. We'll talk Buffalo Bills next week.
Sounds good.
You already seem stoked for it, so we're looking forward to it.
Can't wait.
All right.